Hello and welcome to Cargo Masterminds presented by cargo.one. My name is Reggie John and you are watching Cargo Masterminds presented by cargo.one. This is our weekly episode where we bring leaders from global logistic companies for a one-to-one conversation. The Hong Kong headquartered Cathay Pacific Cargo had its origins as a small regional freight operator in 1946. 75 years later, Cathay Pacific has grown to become one of the world's leading international cargo carriers, operating from the world's busiest air cargo hub. Cathay Pacific's cargo business accounts for around 25% of its annual revenues. Cathay Pacific was also one of the global carriers to have its operations severely impacted very early on in the pandemic. More than 20 months later, the cargo business is getting stronger and stronger for Cathay, but the slow return of the belly capacity on long-haul wide body is hugely impacting the volumes. My guest today is Mark Sutch, Regional General Manager for South Asia, Middle East and Africa at Cathay Pacific Airways. Mark joins me in this episode of Cargo Masterminds to discuss how Cathay Pacific Cargo Division managed its businesses and operations in the pandemic. Mark, welcome to Cargo Mastermind. It is such a pleasure to have you join us for Cargo Mastermind episode after 20 months of doing interviews and meet up just behind, sitting behind screens. Thanks for making time for us.
Reggie, absolute pleasure, and I'm delighted you could come and do this in person.
Let's start from where we stopped our last conversation, and that was in February 2020 during the Air Cargo India conference and exhibition when coronavirus was only a problem for China and Cathay began to face its impact on its mainland China network and also its main hub in Hong Kong. 20 months since then, the world is a whole different. What are some of the stories of aviation and air cargo that have left most impact on you and on Cathay Pacific?
Well, Reggie, I remember the interview well in February 2020 at the Cargo conference. Who would have thought 20 months later we're still talking about this? As you rightly said, at that time, China was impacted, as was Hong Kong, and we were already talking at the time about cutting back some of our capacity. As you knew, we'd done that in India itself. Moving forward now, a lot of things have changed. I think many people think the world came to a standstill, but it hasn't. A lot of things have changed both in the market, but also internally. So if you take Cathay Pacific, we've had huge changes. In October last year, we announced what we call a dual brand strategy. You will have remembered that we had 3 brands before. We had Cathay Pacific, Cathay Dragon, which operated into India and Bangalore and Calcutta, and Hong Kong Express. We've now restructured to 2 brands, a dual brand strategy. So Cathay Pacific Airways, our main network long-haul carrier, and Hong Kong Express, which is our low-cost offering in Hong Kong. So that's a big fundamental change in the whole airline. And then when it comes to other aspects of operations, which we'll explore as we go through today, obviously we've looked differently about how we carry cargo, as have many carriers around the globe. So lots of changes.
If we take a look at the cargo volume carried for 2020, it stands at about 1.3 million tons, which is about 34% below the 2019 volume of just over 2 million tons. Can you give us a sense of how you will close 2021 and is there a chance that you will come anywhere close to 2 million tons volume carried for 2021?
I'd love to tell you 2 million will be hit. In reality, I think it's going to be a challenge. Where we stand in October is just over 1 million tons. Now, we all know that the last few months of the year in the cargo business, particularly for Asian-based carriers, tends to be the real peak. So I'm pretty confident we'll beat last year's figure. Certainly, if you're looking at yield, we'll beat last year's figure. We've got some, very impressive yield improvements year on year, about 24%, right? Which is obviously it's a factor of the market. We're seeing it globally. But if you ask me about 2 million tons, I can't say we'll make it. But we're certainly going to we're going to close out the year very well, and we're happy with that.
I have the numbers, the last declared numbers for the September 2020. Let's look at the last reported cargo tonnage numbers, and that is for September, and the tonnage is about 131,000 tons, which is the highest for a single month since the pandemic. We are still in the peak season, and what do you think is the direction of the tonnage carried for the 3 months remaining for 2021?
Well, Reggie, it's going to be better than that figure. As you know, August and September tend to be very quiet months, actually, traditionally for cargo. And the fact that we've had records in both those months is obviously showing a very good sign towards this last quarter. So I'm pretty comfortable and confident the last quarter is going to be very, very positive for us, as it is for the entire industry, frankly.
Let's concentrate on the cargo strategies and how those strategies actually changed over the last 20 months since the pandemic. For you, actually more than 20 months. I think it's almost 2 years. From belly capacity vanishing overnight to making full utilization of your freighters, to repurposing some of your long-haul wide-body passenger flights only for cargo operations. How quickly did you make decisions and how tough was to make such decisions?
Reggie, as you know, for Cathay, cargo's always been cool. We've got 20 dedicated freighters, which is one of the larger fleets for a sort of an airline like us, a passenger cargo combination airline. But clearly that wasn't going to be enough. When the belly capacity disappeared from obviously the closure of all the reduction in our passenger frequencies, we needed to act fast. In 2020, I think we operated about 5,000 cargo-only flights. So these are passenger flights just taking belly cargo. This year, more like 20,000 year to date, just below 20,000 year to date, and we've still got a few months to run. So look, we started fast. We've had to make a few other sort of structural adjustments within the fleet. We've had permission through our regulator to convert 6 aircraft now. So we've got 777-300 aircraft that have had some economy seats removed. Gives you an extra 12 tons in the cabin. We're deploying those mainly on long haul and regional flights within Southeast Asia. So look, lots of changes have been made, but very, very difficult to make up for the huge reduction in belly capacity globally. As you know, pre-pandemic, in a typical year, 50% of the world's air cargo was carried in belly aircraft, right? That's disappeared, but I think we've acted pretty fast, along with everyone else in the market, frankly. I was, the beginning of this pandemic, it was really interesting to see how many, I think, airlines that I would consider to be non-core carriers of cargo, suddenly had to get inventive and start using those aircraft, particularly when there was a rush of PPE around the world and medical aid. The way that people reacted was swift, and we were part of that reaction as well.
So how long do you intend to fly cargo-only passenger flights? Because the Civil Aviation Authority of the European Union has allowed aircraft to fly cargo-only passenger flights till the half of next year.
Yeah, look, we'll be operating them so long as our belly capacity on passenger flights is where it is. In reality, in September this year, we only operated 13% of our passenger capacity globally. Okay, and a lot of that's down to our business model. We're mainly a predominantly long-haul international carrier. We don't have a domestic market, obviously, by the fact that Hong Kong doesn't have a domestic air operation. So, so long as we're not flying our passenger flights, we'll need to supplement that because the demand there from our shippers and our partners in the forwarding industry is huge, and we want to help them out with that. So yeah, we're going to continue to fly these well into next year.
But what will be the determining factor that you will continue operating cargo-only passenger flights? Because will the yield make the difference, or the return of the passenger flights?
Of course, look, yield's important, and without the yields being where they are today, the economics on cargo flights is always going to be challenged. For us, I think it will be determined by how quickly we bring back our passenger capacity. And that will be determined by, I guess, a COVID recovery, driven by many aspects, whether it's quarantine measures in markets we're flying to. But I guess as passenger capacity comes on, obviously we'll be looking at reducing some of those cargo-only planes, because by default, they'll be needed to carry our passengers, which is what they were built for and what they're designed for. At the moment, we're obviously being inventive and using them for another purpose, and they're doing great in those missions. But ideally, we'd like to have those aircraft back in the fleet operating passenger service.
Mark, air freight capacity has been under severe stress for the last 22 months, and it is likely to stay from all estimates that way for some more time, as some predicts that it will be entire 2022 and maybe early part of 2023. As a result, freight rates have been very volatile and they continue to remain elevated. How have you been able to align your customers to the new market realities?
I think it's a global issue. It's not only happening obviously on the air side, it's happening on the ocean side, which we look at a lot. Going forward, we're going to see strong demand well into next year. In our sort of internal planning, and obviously we're getting towards looking at budgets for next year, we're very much thinking that it's going to be a strong market, a lot of demand out there. Supply is going to remain limited. It will be coming back as passenger services start, but we still think that the way supply chains are at the moment and the way demand is, particularly for sectors such as e-commerce, there's going to be strong demand going forward. So we're pretty comfortable about the way that the cargo market is over the next coming year.
How has the supply-demand mismatch on account of the pandemic and on ocean freight's container shortage reduced the chances of carriers entering into long-term contracts and BSAs with freight forwarders? Is there a kind of readjustment of the dynamism in terms of the relationship that carriers have with their customers like freight forwarders?
Yeah, look, I think it depends market by market. If you look at a market like we're sitting in India, it's a very ad hoc market, so we haven't really entered into long-term contracts. If you go to our home market, it's very much a market in which shippers and freight forwarders have a very clear visibility on volumes going forward, and therefore the ability to have a block space agreement with an airline is absolutely critical. We're obviously continuing to work along that, but as space becomes critical, and a lot of other people are shifting from ocean to air, we need to try and fulfill as many of our shippers' requirements as possible, often on an ad hoc basis. Cathay has always had long-term agreements, and I think they'll continue in the future. I think it's very important, particularly when you've got very stable supply chain markets, where you've got forecasts that are very solid, really.
Now let's come to another important topic of the pandemic is the digital transformation. I think people who have built their digital strategy well in advance, I think they managed to deal with the crisis much better. How has been the digital transformation journey and the technology adoption that happened in Cathay Pacific over the last 20 months? Has there been an acceleration of digital adoption, technology, innovation in Cathay Pacific?
Sure. Look, we actually talked about this 20 months ago. I mean, you were asking us about digitalization pre-pandemic, which was great foresight of you there, Reggie. And I told you at the time there were a lot of stuff going on, okay? Both within internal systems that we use to aid our people around the world, interact with our shippers and our forwarders, as well as sort of digitalization that enables smoother transit of goods from our customers. So one of the key areas we've been working on is visibility of track and trace, and Ultra Track, which is a new technology we've introduced, really driven by having clear visibility on movement of vaccines. And we offer this, free of charge for our vaccine movements, which have been obviously very significant since vaccines started to be produced. That's just one example where we're using all sorts of technologies. In this case, it's low emission Bluetooth technology to have clear visibility end to end. That includes temperature, vibration, other aspects of transport of goods. And we've also introduced with that for our customers a 24/7 operation control center, so that our customers at any time have got full visibility on where their product may be, and if there's something should go wrong, that we can address that as soon as possible. We're also working with IATA-1, the paperless transportation of goods. Obviously, this is really
IATA-1 record.
Yeah, IATA-1 record, absolutely. We've done some trials with IATA in their, I think, probably their third round now of trials with a couple of forwarders and obviously Hong Kong Airport. But the IATA-1 record is really an extension of Airways, Bill, moving further up and down the chain, as it were. We were, as a carrier, we're the first to reach 100% Airways Bill globally. Shows our commitment to this, and we're really excited about these products going forward. I mean, for us, I'd like to say we've had lots of time to look at digitization. We've used the time well to look at it, but we've been very busy developing lots of other things and obviously doing all the flying we're doing at the moment. But I'd say we're in a really good position, and we've invested. We've understood that you need to invest in digitization, and we certainly haven't held back from that.
Okay, so your product that you launched quite recently, that's the Ultra Track. So that's available right now across 25 airports?
It's available across 25 airports. We're rolling it out where we can. It does involve infrastructure within airports. Therefore, there is a process of making sure we can get into all airports. But it's 25 airports at the moment, and obviously that will just be growing over time.
Are these available also in Indian airports right now?
In Indian airports, I think we're in process of actually getting it up and running. But as I said, there is technology that needs to go into the airport, and therefore we've got to have the negotiations with the right airport operators in that regard.
As we are actually talking on the tracking visibility, I think we also have seen the visibility as also a key trend in the pandemic. We have seen logistic technology companies really getting funded because they offer that tracking and tracing and visibility aspect to every shipment. Again, inspired or being driven by e-commerce companies like Amazon. How important are the integration of these technologies into things like IATA One Record? The unfortunate part is that when we talk about digitalization in the air freight industry, it actually reduces into paper airway bills, into electronic airway bills. So what has been your observation of the industry's appetite for digital transformation?
Well, I mean, I guess as an end user, both of you and I, when we're buying anything, whether it's from an e-commerce platform, we understand how important it is as someone who's clicking that button at home, wanting to know where your goods and services are. You know, by understanding that ourselves, I think we realize how important it is to our customers as well. So for us, we've obviously put the investment in there. UltraTrack, I think, is a good one. The IATA One record, you know, it comes with lots of challenges. The airway bill at the beginning, if you remember back, many years ago, there was a lot of skepticism about it. We're now at 100%. People adapt to these technologies and they realize the benefits in time. I guess one of the challenges is that you have so many stakeholders involved, particularly when it's cross-border transaction of goods. You've got obviously customs and brokers involved. It becomes more complex and it's going to take time. But I think ultimately we all understand that we need to be in this digital space, and we're investing heavily in the entire Internet of Things that are going to back that up.
Okay, how important are the emergence of digital marketplaces where capacity is being made available and the freight forwarders can actually buy the capacity? So capacity is being bought and sold on digital marketplaces. We have seen a similar trend in the passenger side decades back. Now that's something that is happening in the freight industry. How do you view some of these digital marketplace platforms and what is the level of engagement that Cathay Pacific Cargo has with some of these platforms?
Sure. So most of our distribution is direct with our forwarding partners, yeah, and we've worked along that, and we've digitized many of those processes with our partners. In fact, a lot of the work we're doing internally at the moment is about us interacting digitally with our partners rather than over phone or via email, so that they can get immediate, confirmation of bookings and allotments. I think it's important to understand that air cargo brings in a lot more complexity than selling a seat on an aircraft. On a seat on an aircraft, you've got a business, a premium economy, and an economy seat. And distribution systems are quite simple. It's a seat. Obviously, when it comes to cargo, there's many different commodities, there's many different dimensions, there's weights, there's a lot more restrictions, and therefore it's complicated to try and make that transaction. Now we're working a lot with particular partners to make sure that we have that process digitized. As far as we're concerned, distribution is a hugely important part of our business, and the better the distribution can become, and the wider it can become, the better it is for us and the better it is for our customers.
Let's have a word on some of your verticals, some of the specific commodities which are specialized products for Cathay Pacific. Where is your focus? Did some of those verticals really do well during the pandemic? Is there something that did not do well? And what is your outlook for the cargo coming through e-commerce, cross-border e-commerce?
Well, let's start with cross-border e-commerce. I mean, I think the latest figures we've sort of looked at internally, there's many studies, is that this is going to hit about $44 billion next year with an 11% growth over the next 5 years, right? So it's a huge business. We've traditionally carried a lot of e-commerce. Sometimes that's been consolidated, through various forwarders. And now, as I said to you earlier, we're working on, digitalization of how we can fulfill e-commerce solutions in a much more efficient way. So e-commerce is key. But outside of that, you talk about our other sort of products. Obviously, we're in a pandemic, so pharma's huge, right? We're present in most of the big pharma production markets. We've therefore, taken our offering in terms of pharma, in terms of cool container solutions, from just a single offering to many different companies now. UltraTrack is part of that to make sure that, our customers and medical authorities are comfortable with the way in which we're transporting these vital drugs or vaccines. In pandemic times, people have continued to have high demand for perishable goods. That's doing fantastically well. In fact, during the pandemic, we've actually launched a flight from Australia, Hobart in Australia, Tasmania, to Hong Kong, which is obviously distributing all perishables. That's what comes out of Tasmania. And, we looked at that for many years. Is this a viable market? And interestingly enough, it's become a viable market because Sutch has locked down in a market like Australia that domestic flights between Tasmania and Sydney or Tasmania and Melbourne, which would then move on to our freighters or to other belly capacity, has disappeared. So we saw an air bridge opportunity. We work closely with the Australian government on that. So perishables is another big one. In a market like India, we do a lot of specialized lift. Most of our freight out of here tends to be big, bulky freight, right? We do a lot of automotive parts, but we're also doing a lot of single big pieces. Our aircraft with nose loading, our freighter aircraft, the ability to do that. And therefore, we've become a big specialist in this market of moving, huge engineering bits of cargo. Going forward, I think all of those sectors are going to continue to grow. But yeah, at the moment, I think our focus has been a lot on pharma this year, just because of where we are in the pandemic and needing to help out people and governments.
Mark, let's hope that the wide body, long haul passenger flights come back to full play as quickly as possible, and we have the entire access to the belly capacity. But according to you, what would be the criticality of the main deck capacity or the freighters? Will freighters play a critical role going forward for global commerce as well as for global air freight industry?
Yeah, well, you're preaching to the converted here. As an airline, we've had freighters going back, obviously, to our 707 freighters back in the 70s. Well, our first aircraft was essentially a freighter as well, back in the late 40s. Look, Hong Kong, it remains the biggest international air cargo hub in the world, right? And that's not going to go away. And the Greater Bay Area in Hong Kong, in southern China, continues to grow. I think we're very much in the freighter game. And if you actually look at freighter demand at the moment for conversions from passenger to freighter, some might argue it's because we've got such an uptick in cargo. I think it's long term, it's here to stay. Cross-border trade, right? E-commerce trade that we talked about being $44 billion next year. That's got to be fulfilled. As passenger bellies come back, as passenger flights come back, don't forget, passengers are carrying their baggage. There's going to be less room there for cargo. Freighters have got a place to play. And for us, I think very much, we're not concerned about that going forward. We're very happy with our freighter fleet. And yeah, I look forward, as you said, to passengers coming back, some of that freight moving from our cargo-only planes back onto our freighters and having the balance that we had before.
But what are your observations about a lot of companies wanting to have a freighter? They want to order it today and get it delivered yesterday. That's the kind of demand for freighters, both in terms of the production freighters as well as the converted freighter. We have seen the ocean liners starting new air cargo carriers, placing order for production freighters. We have also seen the advancement in the passenger narrow body aircraft, which are long range, but giving you a considerably less capacity on the belly for cargo. So in that context, will freighters really play an important role?
I think individual carriers need to think very hard about the freighter game. I mean, as I said, for us, it's something that's completely core. Cargo has always been a core business of us, and our geography is such that it will remain a core business. For carriers wanting to get into freighters, it is a different game to just carrying cargo as an ancillary. It's very much a core game. It's I hope people are doing their homework on the future demands beyond just next year and the year after, because a freighter's not just for Christmas. It's for life, really, right? And you've got to make sure you use that aircraft to the best of its ability. They don't come cheap. Conversions are not cheap. Yeah, I can see the frenzy of demand out there, but at the same time, I'm pretty confident that air cargo, driven mainly by e-commerce, is going to grow over years to come, and there'll be room for new players in the market.
Mark, my last question is on what are some of the important learnings from the pandemic that you have picked, and also your reflections about the agility and the resilience of the global supply chain. The pandemic exposed the fragility of global supply chains.
Yeah, no, look, it did very early on, but I think what's been fascinating is how quickly people reacted to it. We've talked about people, carriers bringing in cargo-only planes very quick, converting aircraft, taking seats out. I think we've seen lots of innovations. We've also seen a lot of advancement digitally, whether it's the way in which we connect, communicate, and people understand how important it is. We're all missing that sort of personal touch in the business. It's been very important in shipping and cargo for many years now. It's the first time we've met in 20 months, and I think we've missed that. However, one of the things that's I think really impressed me has been the way in which our people, right? And this I'm talking about Cathay now, but I'm sure it's the same for many of my colleagues in other airlines. The way in which our people have reacted in really hard circumstances. And if I think in terms of India, Reggie, you were here in February this year when we went through that second wave. Not once did we stop operating a cargo-only plane. Not once did we stop operating freighter. And this was a time when we had handling people at our airport and our engineers having to really battle very difficult times, either dealing with COVID within their families and not being able to make it, and people standing in. I mean, it's just been incredible the way in which I think our industry has stood the test of time and really sort of stepped up to the plate. And I think the airline or the air cargo industry has also been a phenomenally important way in which we've dealt with this pandemic. Obviously, the distribution of vaccines. I mean, that's clearly the way out of the pandemic, and who's been responsible for really a huge part of fulfilling the needs of getting that to people around the world. It's been air cargo.
Mark, thanks so much. It was such a pleasure talking to you. Thank you for making time for talk to us in Cargo Masterminds.
Thanks, Reggie. Pleasure as always.
That was Mark Sutch, Regional General Manager for South Asia, Middle East and Africa at Cathay Pacific Airways. I hope you enjoyed watching this interview. If you like what we do, please do share it among your networks. Also, if you're not a subscriber of our YouTube channel, please do subscribe now and click the bell icon so that you do not miss any of our new videos. Join me next Monday as I bring a new guest for a one-to-one conversation here in Cargo Masterminds presented by cargo.one. Until next Monday, take good care of yourself and have a great week ahead. Thank you.